Welcome back to the Nick Bartlett Show, everybody. And joining me on the show today is Jordan Kaye. Jordan currently covers South Carolina for the state newspaper. And I actually originally spoke with him last year. He covered Boise State for Bronco Nation News at that time. Welcome back to the show today, Jordan.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and so today it's going to be a little bit different, but kind of your standard stuff. Today we're going to do light previews on both South Carolina and Boise State. We'll talk about the key players on both squads and really just the changing landscape that is college football. As always, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. I'm tired of saying this. Do your thing, guys. In all seriousness, you follow us on Twitter, but yeah, do the thing on YouTube. With that, let's get to the question. So, first question here, starting with South Carolina. What are your initial thoughts on freshman quarterback Lenore Sellers, and do you think the offensive line will be able to protect him a little bit better this year?
Yeah, they the offensive line can't really protect worse, but a lot of that was injuries. I mean, they had like 6, 7 scholarship guys out at one point, so they were really kind of scraping towards the bottom of their depth chart towards the end of the season. That's why the old quarterback Spencer Rattler is with the Saints now, got hit so many times. But Sellers is like a big, massive dude. I'm like, even like Taylor Green, who was at Boise State, like. Sellers has like 20 pounds on him at like 6'3", 242 pounds. So this is a big boy who can throw the ball a long way and also has the dual threat ability. I imagine they're going to have a lot of, play action pass and some option stuff and really trying to get him out in space. The big thing is just like staying healthy. I mean, when you've got a quarterback that big who's going to run a bunch, this happens all over the place. It's like you're just worried they're going to get hurt. They're going to run. Into trouble and just get injured. So that's the big thing for him. But what we've seen so far is he's a kid who just makes the right read. He doesn't need to hit the home run every time. He's just gonna kind of hit single after single and hope that that ends up marching everyone down the field. So from what we've seen so far, pretty confident, mature, poised kid who should come in and start right away.
Yeah, I mean, and if with the athletic ability, obviously, if you're able to hit singles and make the right throws, that should trend in the right direction. And so,
Yeah.
and for those of you on the West Coast, because I know you're probably not too familiar with South Carolina, kind of to get you caught up, Lenore Sellers didn't play too much, but at South Florence High School, which is in South Carolina, he threw for 2,948 yards and 45 touchdowns. He also ran for over 1,300 yards and
Yeah.
17 touchdowns. So kind of just getting people on the West Coast caught up a little bit to the potential of this kid. And then the one other thing I want to ask is there a potential we could see Auburn transfer Robbie Ashford?
Yeah, I mean, technically, Sellers hasn't won the job. There's still a competition between Ashford and Lenora Sellers. And for the West Coast, Ashford, he originally committed to Oregon he was from Hoover, Alabama. He was a big time recruit that Oregon ended up grabbing. And he actually played baseball at Oregon for a year. And then Oregon kind of, they had too many quarterbacks. They recruited over him. They eventually got, God, I'm trying to think who it was. It might have been it wasn't. It was right after Justin Herbert. Who was that?
After Herbert,
Was it
shoot,
Ty Thompson? I don't know.
sounds good to me, man. All these
Bo
years playing
Nix,
together,
yeah. It was
um,
right. Yeah, it was before Bo Nix, but yeah. So he's a dude kind of who's built almost exactly like Sellers. Big body, can run. I imagine even if he doesn't win the starting job, they're going to try and find some role for him, even like 4, 5, 6 times a game where you can just throw him in and give somewhat of a different look. Or if you really do want to run the quarterback instead of putting Sellers into harm's way, you kind of have Ashford have some QB runs, and he's athletic enough that you're not doing it just for fun. Like he can actually make things happen. So yeah, I do think we're going to see probably both guys at some point this season.
yeah, and again, so Ashford kind of mixed success at Auburn for everyone on the West Coast. And one thing I heard, actually, listen to kind of one of your local guys on a national podcast, is that he was actually not their initial choice for the backup. I heard they're targeting I believe he was the former Vandy quarterback at
Yeah,
LSU. Um,
AJ Swan, yeah. He was they were trying to go after a lot of different quarterbacks and missed on a decent amount. And that's kind of why Ashford was there late. Like he committed really late in the transfer process, and so yeah, definitely wasn't the first guy on their list.
Well, and I'll ask you about this later, but I mean, he has SEC starting experience. I would expect he's going to be formidable enough, definitely as a backup. But moving
Yeah,
ahead here,
yeah.
so kind of, I don't want to get too in depth on Boise State. Just you covered them last year, and just what type of impact does a transfer like Malachi Nelson have on the psyche?
I would think like just on the outside, it's like in this era of college football when it seems like the rich are getting richer and that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to split off at some level. Um, it's massive to see that Boise State, a school that has been left out of conference realignment, has been left out of the national conversation so many times, is able to get a former five-star kid from Southern Cal. That says everything about Boise State, says everything about Spencer Danielson, says everything about how they can recruit going forward in the NIL age, in the transfer portal age. I thought it was massive. Now, will it mean anything if Malachi doesn't play or doesn't play up to the standard? I don't think so. No, like it doesn't. It'll be like, oh crap, they whiffed on a five-star. We can go through the list of like a 25 stars that like didn't work out, and you're like, great, that's just you kind of forget about them, and it'll be like, oh, they got that guy who used to be a good player in high school, so it really won't matter much. But if he starts lighting it up, it's going to be like, holy cow, you know, this kid thought he couldn't succeed at Southern Cal, but thought he could succeed at Boise State, and didn't need all the NIL. Boise State had whatever NIL money he needed. It's probably not as much as he would have gotten elsewhere, but it didn't matter to him. And the more you talk to kids, it's like perhaps it's only 10 to 15% of the kids that aren't just looking for the NIL money. Sometimes it's like just go after those kids. Like that's probably who Spencer Danielson is going to go after, is the guys like, hey, we don't want them to be all about NIL or money. Like we want them to be about development. And time will tell as if like you can put together an entire football roster of those guys and win.
Yeah, no, and so one thing you touched on at the beginning of that, and this is probably going to lose some fans from my alma mater, but I'm going to do my best to cover this objectively. You're talking about Boise State and realignment, and like everyone knows I went to WSU at this point. Like I got a lot of love for them, but historically speaking, Boise State is a better football program. In market size, I know I can't speak to the TV analysts and all that fancy blah 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 data, Nielsen data, but in terms of pure market size, Boise is a heck of a lot bigger than Pullman, a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why they aren't potentially getting more looks at realignment. And yeah, so just that kind of caught me off guard, but that's
Well,
definitely brought.
it's kind of like the thing with Washington State getting Mike Leach. It's kind of it starts a national conversation of like, holy cow, like why did Mike Leach want to go to Washington State when he could have gone other places? And then it starts to suddenly people start thinking about Washington State differently, and if it's good enough for Mike Leach, maybe it's good enough for me. And you're hoping, if you're a Boise State fan, that's kind of like what happens. Like, oh, if it was good enough for like Malachi Nelson and he could have gone other places, maybe it's good enough for me. And you would hope that kids see that and kind of believe there is a path there, that you can be a highly rated recruit and go to Boise State over getting perhaps more money somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And so I like what you just say. I'm not going to read off his high school stats because he could just be another 5-star bust. Just one thing to consider for him at Boise. I know on the West Coast, a lot of you probably know this already, but Boise returns 4 starting offensive linemen, including a sophomore in Cage Casey, who was a freshman All-American. So he should have solid protection, particularly in the Mountain West. But hopping back to South Carolina here, doing the flip-flop today. Instead of going super in depth on the defense, because I feel that's probably a little too much. Just
Yeah.
what are like 3 names we should know out here on the West Coast?
They have this safety named Nick Ebenwari, who's like 6'3", 220. He's a junior this year. he's going to be in the NFL draft in what is that, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, probably first or second rounder. The kid is just the kind of a crazy size for a safety. Probably should be playing linebacker. If he had like 2 more inches, he might be a defensive end. Like he's that big playing safety. Just has crazy ball skills and athleticism. I mean, he's going to be on an NFL roster. That's probably one guy who a lot of people might not know because South Carolina hasn't been very good, and it's not like he's racking up 8 interceptions a year. So that's one. They have a linebacker named Debo Williams, kind of just like the leader of their defense, just one of those really, really good college linebackers who's going to get a shot probably in the NFL after this year as a senior. And then the really crazy one, they've got a kid, Dylan Stewart, who's one of the 5 stars that they grabbed this year out of Washington, D.C. The kid is like, he said he had 5% body fat and like 230 pounds, like 6'5", 6'6", or whatever. Like just unbelievable. You're not sure yet, like what he's going to look like against SEC competition, but in the spring game, he was so dominant. It was almost like he was taking away an entire side of the field, just beating offensive linemen so fast that he could almost contain, whatever side of the field he was on and force the quarterback to go the opposite way. It was just like ridiculous domination that you almost never see from a freshman. So that's probably the one dude with the highest ceiling who South Carolina fans are going into this season being like, number one, is he going to be able to start? Like, two, like, how good can he be? Like, is he going to be one of the best defenders on South Carolina, or is he one of the best defenders in the SEC? And it's like, there is that hope that, holy cow, this dude has the chance to be one of those defensive guys that everyone in the country knows.
Yeah, and so as Jordan was touching on, so I appreciate you got me one player at each level. Don't got the stats for the lineman, but talking about M.M. War, I think I'm going to say it wrong, but M.M. Wari, 71 tackles, 2 picks,
Yeah.
8 pass deflections. Sorry for my mispronunciation there.
Yeah.
And then a name that I kind of looked up, or I guess found, obviously, his stats speak for itself, was Jalen Kilgore, 76 tackles, 1 forced fumble, and 1 interception. And then one thing I heard, because obviously stats don't hold their own, I heard that South Carolina, again, from one of your local guys, so it's kind of, I wanted to recheck with you. I heard they're basically they could have one of the best defensive lines in the country, or is that kind of wait and see?
Yeah, I mean they could. They bring back a lot of their defensive tackles who are a bunch of older guys with veteran experience. But they just have so many edges, like so many guys who are like 6'4" to 6'6", 230 pounds, long and athletic. And it's just ridiculous depth and athleticism that they're going to just be able to shuffle through edges and outside linebackers like every couple plays. And it's just a ridiculous amount of talent on that side of the ball. And even if there's an injury or two, they can overcome it. If there's fatigue, they can overcome it. So you would expect they'd be really good. They're going to be playing like a weird, they're calling it like a flex nickel. So basically on some plays, they'll be in a 4-2, and other plays they'll be in a 3-3-5. And so there's going to be a lot of changes. You need guys who are really tall and athletic who can go between being an outside linebacker and a defensive end. And that's why a lot of teams aren't going to run that scheme, because it's like you need to have just crazy recruiting to get those types of bodies. And South Carolina has it. And so, that's kind of the reason for optimism with that D line. And when you have the dudes like Stewart, who are even the young, unproven guys, are still ridiculous, it gives you a lot of hope.
Yeah, and that's why I always played Madden and not NCAA football, because those defensive schemes, they become too much, and I don't know how to beat those at a certain point. It just becomes crazy.
Yeah, it's hard.
I respect the ingenuity, being able to switch between a 4-2-5 and a 3-3-5. Pretty simple question here. Again, hopping back to Boise, and then this is pretty much the last of the back in the fourth, and I'll kind of go to some more housekeeping stuff. Just again, not a full breakdown, but the specific word I'm looking for is, do you think Boise's offense is enough pop to win the Mountain West? I know they lost top wideout Eric McAllister.
Oh,
they returned Ashton Genty. So what are just kind of your thoughts from seeing the team last year?
100%. Like even they got a bunch of receivers, and they grabbed the kid Chris Marshall from one of the best junior college players in the country. That basically solves the McAllister thing. Even though I loved um, Eric, but with all the transfers they got, you have to think their receiver room's better. Whoever the quarterback is, you got to kind of trust it, whether it's Malachi or Maddox Madsen. You have Dirk Cutter running things. Um, that's always a really good sign, because what he did 2 years ago with Taylor Green, it was, he just changed that entire offense and kind of out schemed the entire Mountain West on at sometimes. And then you have Ashton Jeanty, who is like, they're trying to promote him as a Heisman guy. Probably not winning the Heisman, being in the Mountain West, and that sucks. But like, there is no reason to think that he's not the best running back in the country. Like, if you're Boise State, like if you're some of these Mountain West teams and you play Ashton Jeanty, like, it's hard to watch him and think there's like four running backs better than him. He's just that good. And Ashton Jeanty is the best player in the Mountain West this year. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not close. Like, Torrey Horton's really good. There's a couple defensive guys, but it's not really close. Like, he's that dynamic, such a big body who can just run through guys, but small and shifty enough that he can just dart past them or make really impressive cuts in the hole. And then his ability as a pass catcher is just game changing. Like, no matter who the quarterback is, he's the safety blanket. He's the one who, hey, if they're loading the box, like, put Ashton Jeanty as a slot receiver, have him catch some slants or some bubble screens or something. Like, that could be your entire offense. Like, they basically won the Mountain West with like Ashton Jeanty just being a beast. So yeah, they have plenty of offensive firepower. Definitely the most in the Mountain West, and probably more than a lot of like Big 10, Big 12 teams.
Yeah, and so so I lied with the flip flopping, because you took me ahead to a question I had way later down here, but I gotta ask. And it would have made more sense if I stayed with order, but now I can't do that.
You're good. You're good.
I want to ask you though. So it's what you said. I'm trying to say this very lightly with respect to everyone. So Jeanty probably won't win the Heisman. I agree with you. Is he the best running back in the country? I'm not sure. I just got to ask.
Yeah.
Because this is, again, and I'm saying this as lightly as possible, being in the Mountain West, I cover the Pac-2, the Pac-12. Now we cover the Big 10, the SEC, just about everything. But there's a talent difference. So when you're comparing, Ashton Jeanty to a Raheem Sanders, and we even touched on him, the South Carolina transfer from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Is Jeanty really, I don't want to say it like this, but I have to, is he really that much better, or is it maybe a little bit of hype?
I don't know if he's that much better, especially like at the running back position, which is just not as important as it used to be. Like, there's a lot of guys who I think if you flip-flopped them, like, you would notice like almost no difference. The kid at Minnesota is really good. Ollie Gordon or Oklahoma State's really good. You got ETN at Georgia. I mean, there's a bunch of these dudes. Donovan Edwards at Michigan. But there's a bunch of these guys, and it's, they're all really good. And if you flip-flopped whatever team they're on, they're probably going to be about the same guy. But like, there's no reason to think Ashton Jeanty's like not as good as any one of those dudes, especially because of the versatility. Like, he just does everything so well. It's why a lot of SEC teams were offering him a ton of money to try and go to their school, because they know, they kind of see the same thing as like, the stuff he has on film is so ridiculous that he would be good whether he's in the SEC, the Big 12, Big 10, like, really doesn't matter. Now, is he going to get the crazy gaudy yardage? Like, probably not, but it's going to be like close. Maybe take a couple 100 yards off here or there. But like, it's not like he's just going to be stymied by whatever competition level he's at. I think he is like that good. Like, kind of like a Raheem Rocket Sanders type. Like, I see, I haven't watched too much of Sanders, but it's like, sometimes it's like, I don't know if there's that much of a difference. I think you could flip flop either one of them, and they'd be just about the same person. I got to watch Sanders more, but just watching Jeanty enough, it doesn't matter where he's playing. I think he's one of the best running backs in the country.
And then just really quickly again, for the West Coast viewers who may not be familiar with South Carolina as much, when we're talking about Raheem Rocket Sanders, Rocket is his nickname, so Raheem Sanders.
Yeah.
He was injured a lot last year, but he ran for at Arkansas. He ran for over 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2022 and averaged 9.7 yards per carry. So we're all kind of waiting to see if he bursts on the scene this year. And then I guess now we're hopping back to Boise. The final kind of football based question. You took me ahead, which I always appreciate. So just a quick easy question. What's your feel on Boise's defense this year?
I think they're going to be really good. You look at some of the transfer guys, and that's going to help. They bring back um, their one of their best linebackers in Marco Notriani. Like, that's massive. They bring back almost their entire secondary, which struggled at times last year, but started to really come on towards the end of the year, and just having that experience is good. So you got Rodney Robinson, Alexander Tubner. You got guys who have started plenty of games in the Mountain West. That's massive. And then you've got, the preseason defensive player of the year and Ahmed Hassanin. And what he did the last like 6 games of the season was ridiculous. I mean, he was just the cog that kind of kept Boise's defense going. Had I can't remember how many, 5, 6 sacks towards the end of the year. And you're expecting that, hey, could he get to like 12, 13, 14 sacks this year? I mean, that's like, it's a little crazy, but it's like, yeah, it seems possible. And so when you've got a guy like that who's just creating so much havoc up front, then you've got really veteran dudes in the back end, like, you're kind of looking at it like, holy cow, like, this seems really good. And then it just helps, like, they've just brought back like so much like coaching experience too on the defensive end. Like, they lost like Kane Ione, which is the safeties coach, and that's fine. But you just have Spencer Danielson right there. You have like an analyst like Ron Collins, who's been a defensive coordinator at plenty of levels. Like, you have Stacy Collins, who's going to be working with special teamers and probably will have a hand in some defense stuff. Like, they just have really smart defensive coaches on their staff right now. That's just going to make things work well. They have the players, they have the coaches. There's no reason to think they're not going to be really good on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and see, I wouldn't have even thought of the coach aspect. That's where having the insider information. Actually appreciate that. So as you touched on though, some of the players, Hassanin 12.5 sacks last year. I appreciate you saying that first, and I needed to hear it one more time. Jaden Virgin Morgan could be a nice kind of compliment.
Yeah.
On the edge rusher, and then the kind of just the big names to know. You touched on Tubner, who I appreciate, 85 tackles last year. The one other name I would really throw out there is going to be Andrew Simpson at linebacker.
Oh yeah, I forgot about him.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed all the other guys. Got everyone else on my notes. But Simpson, 66 tackles, 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 interceptions, and all Mountain West second team. So he clearly the stats speak for itself. So that's going to be the end. Now it's officially the end of the flip flopping. It's going to be the housekeeping questions and kind of just some questions I'm really interested in asking you.
Yeah.
So this one, I'll again tread lightly, but forget what I wrote. Now that you're in the SEC, I personally feel different than ever in Super West Sports that it's the best conference. So I'm going to ask you, by how far is it the best?
By a pretty large margin, just in the competition up and down. And you kind of don't notice it, but when you start like looking at a team like South Carolina or Florida, and you just start looking at the schedule, like, it's so brutal that like there are these teams where, like, if South Carolina wins like 6 games this year, it's going to be a success for a lot of people, like a lot of fans. If they win 7, it's like, holy cow. They win 8, it's like time to throw a parade. Like, that is how tough it is. Yeah, just when you add Oklahoma, Texas, and you have, it's like, it's hard to just find an easy week. Like, the only really easy game is Vanderbilt, who South Carolina gets to play, luckily for them. But in every other conference, like, you have a couple of these, really just crappy programs. The Big 12 perhaps has the second most parity among anyone, just with how many good, decent teams they have. But the Big 10, it's like, if you go to like Illinois, you're like, I'm feeling pretty good. Indiana, I mean, we'll see what Signetti does, but it's not feeling too bad. UCLA is going to be pretty bad, I would think, this year. There's just there's a lot of like bye weeks a little bit in other conferences, and with the SEC, it's like the only bye week is Vanderbilt. And other than that, it's like they're just going to be really really tough games, and to do that for an entire season just makes it so much tougher, and kind of on a different level.
Yeah, and so 100%. I mean, I think that's obviously, and this is one thing I wanted to throw out there for the West Coast who may be trying to argue a little bit. Here's a stat for you that it may change your mind quickly as hell. So I'll put it this way: South Carolina had the 19th best recruiting class nationally. 19th, top 25 class. Good stuff, right? That is the 10th ranked
Yeah,
class in the
yeah,
SEC. Like what?
yeah. It's stuff like that where it's like, yeah, you'll start looking, they'll get a couple 4 stars or grab a 5 star, and you're like, oh, how much did they move up? And it's like, wow, it's behind. And that's not to say like there's like I think Oregon is going to be a top 5 team in the country this year. Like I think Ohio State is the top 5 team in the country this year. Like Clemson just recently won national championships. Like it's not like the SEC is just going to dominate at the top end every year. Um, but like when you look at the depth of the conference and how good every single team is, like it's not even close. And the recruiting thing is the perfect example. Whoever is getting the best players is going to be the best teams, and that's not really rocket science. But yeah, when you say that, yeah, that what is that? 10 of the top 19 teams are from the SEC in terms of recruiting. It kind of opens your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, the way obviously I haven't experienced it. I haven't traveled as much across this country as I'd like. I've watched a lot of football on the West Coast, college and professional, but I just feel when you're talking culture, you have a vibe that's bordering. I don't know if anything. I think there's a lot more. With all love and respect to our European counterparts, a lot more probably civility in Southern college football. But in terms of the vibe, it's pretty close in terms of intensity. You
Yeah,
know, so I think just when you have that level of passion, the expectations are raised. Where in some of these other parts of the country, it's like if our football team's good, well, that's cool. Let's go support them. Let's have a hell of a time. But if
yeah,
but in the South, like if your team's bad, that's a problem. And if you're good, it's like I mean, it just
pandemonium. Yeah,
yeah, pandemonium. That's the word. That's the word. I didn't have one there. So, pretty much the final two questions. I want to respect your time here. Keep these simple. Both are going
yeah,
to be, yeah, both are simple. All right. So, got to ask for all the West Coasters out there. Do you think Boise State can make the college football playoff this year?
yeah. Absolutely. Like with the way it's structured, and the group of 5 gets an automatic bid. Um, Basically, if Boise State wins the Mountain West, they're going to have a really good chance to do it. And you look at the schedule, there's a really there's a chance they go 12-1, winning the Mountain West, and your only loss is to Oregon. Um, that's just kind of the reality. Like the Mountain West looks so different this season. Jeff Tedford's gone from Fresno State. Utah State is a dumpster fire. New Mexico's got a new coach. Nevada's got a new coach. San Diego State's got a new coach. The entire conference looks and UNLV lost their quarterback. Like just every team has just been decimated or changed so much. And perhaps people say that about Boise because they lost their coach and their quarterback, but it's like you look at the talent they brought in and you keep Ashton Genty. Like I mean, they should be favored in every Mountain West game. Granted, they are basically every year, every game, so that doesn't change too much. But yeah, they don't have a crazy hard non-conference schedule aside from that Oregon game. They start their season at Georgia Southern. Um, that's not a good Georgia Southern team. Traveling 2,500, 3,000 miles across the country is going to suck, and playing in the humidity, I guarantee they're not going to have fun with that. But it's not like Georgia Southern's a good team. And then if you can just kind of hang with Oregon, you don't even have to hang with them. Just forget that game. Don't get injured. Don't have Ashton Genty get injured. And then you go into the Mountain West season, and it's not a ton of teams that scare you. Really isn't, unless there's a big surprise. Maybe Colorado State bringing back Fowler Nicolosi and Torrey Horton. Perhaps they really take a jump. But other than that, it's, who are you scared of? Are you scared that Sean Lewis really turned around San Diego State? Are you worried that UNLV has done enough to kind of elevate themselves. Are you worried that I don't even know who else? That's basically all I'd be scared of. I guess Boise State does play Wazoo in September. You got to win that game. That's going to be pretty massive, especially if they somewhat hung tough with Oregon. It's like you can't really lose that Washington State game and still be the favorites to go to the playoff. You could still make it, but you're going to have to hope for some people to lose. So yeah, I think absolutely they're probably the favorites right now. There's definitely some other teams that you think could make it. Looking at App State, James Madison's always good. Granted, they got a new coach, but you know Boise State has to be the favorite with the talent they have returning and the guys they brought in.
Yeah, and I mean, if you just look at it, if people may, I mean, it's just the cold hard truth of the situation. If Boise State can't handle Washington State or Oregon
Yeah,
State, then it's hard to argue they should be in the national championship.
sure.
But I personally think they will. And the one team I've been saying all year to look out for is Fresno State. I think they could cause a lot of people problems, a lot of
I
returning production.
You're right, and I guess Jeff Tedford, he left a really good quarterback. It's not like he left all the ingredients. The coaching, they have the same coaching staff and stuff. It's just a different guy at the top. I'm sure he's going to be still around for phone calls or to help and everything like that. So you're right. I kind of discount Fresno State because Tedford's gone, and that's probably a mistake because they do return a ton of dudes too, and already have that great foundation there.
Yeah, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. And the last question I have, this is literally specific for you. So, you went to ASU, you covered Boise
Yeah,
State, and now you work in the SEC. Is there
yeah.
one thing you want? It doesn't have to be long. Just one thing you want to highlight from each school. It can be football, non-football athletics. Just one positive from each school because those are vastly different places.
Yeah, Arizona State, doesn't have always the best, attendance or whatever or passion amongst football. But when it was going under Todd Graham, like people showed up. But man, there's just like I don't know. It's almost shocking sometimes that they haven't been able to recruit better because like there's few campuses in the country as nice or as pretty or better weather than ASU, and so yeah, just absolutely, like not nowhere I would have rather spent college and to be on that campus and just everything you're able to do within a 10-minute drive is ridiculous. Uh, even having an airport that close is like something people in Columbia would be like, almost move just for that. So, yeah, like just that location can't be beat. Boise State, like just like the uniqueness and the passion of the fans is like just next level. It's at South Carolina. It's like, or people think that every SEC school because they sell out 80,000 means there's more passion. It's like sort of, but not really. It's like there was 100 or 200 people at Boise State who just constantly on social media, just constantly in the fans, like literally would do what like going to beach volleyball games, like my guy Joel York and the Morales brothers with the Blue Collar Club, like those dudes love Boise State as much as anyone, and there are tons and tons of those people. Sometimes you see them at games, sometimes you don't, but man, it was like you would just hear these crazy stories of how much people love Boise State. Of like one dude I did a story on, like his last wish was to watch a Boise State basketball game, or another guy he died and they couldn't find a picture of him not in Boise State gear. It's like there's just this next level passion that kind of comes from all those winning seasons for almost 25, 30 years now. That's just ridiculous. I mean, South Carolina, just the game day atmosphere is like one of the coolest things I've experienced. It starts early in the morning. I mean, you are tailgating for miles, and people who are planning their entire falls around South Carolina football just to tailgate. And then you get in the stadium and just 80,000 people rocking. There's all these different traditions of what song they walk out to and Sandstorm and people waving their towels and, people who've had season tickets for generations and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And I have yet to even see them when things are rocking, like when they're good. Like when they, you hear stories about when they were winning 10 games with Jadeveon Clowney and Steve Spurrier. And, you can only imagine like what the sounds were like then. Um, but just going and seeing that on a week to week basis, even when they're bad and it's crazy, it's like, holy cow, this is next level.
Yeah, and yeah, obviously I can't even imagine the game day atmosphere is what we touched on earlier. Just the love and passion for football down south. I know South
Yeah.
Carolina's got a lot of passion. I had a buddy who used to live there. I think you guys might be braver than me though. He said he had a beautiful house. He said it with a lake in the backyard, but he did say there were water moccasins in that lake. So
Wow. Okay. Never seen one of those.
yeah, so maybe you guys in South Carolina might be a little bit braver than me here in Seattle. The snakes scare me a little bit. And in all
Fair.
seriousness, it's cool to hear what you say about Boise and the passion of their fans, because I think that could be lost. Just because they're in a smaller conference doesn't mean they aren't just as passionate. So um,
Exactly.
I appreciate you bringing that up. But all right, guys, time to get us out of here. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show again, Jordan.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I mean, what I asked him to do was a little unusual, covering the Mountain West, and the SEC. So it's obvious that you stayed intact with the Mountain West, knowing all the coaches are gone, naming some top players. So respect that, you kept it real. You didn't forget about, maybe the littler guys.
No.
We got some faith in our ASU grads. But bottom line, should be a fun year. Should be a fun year all over the nation in college football. Should prove interesting out here on the West Coast to see if Boise State can make that run to the college football playoff. I'll definitely tune in now that I've researched South Carolina, see how they're doing. Hell, if they make a really crazy run, might have to reach out to Jordan again. You can follow Jordan at Jordan_K23 on X. Again, that's at JORDAN_KAYE23 on X. And thank you everyone for watching again, and stay yourself.